Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. On this episode, Jacquie will be having a conversation with Keegan, who was sexually molested by somebody close to her in her youth. Keegan shares how this trauma has shaped her, how she has learned to cope with such unfortunate circumstances, and how she is learning to be able to live a life of freedom and healing since. Though the pain was a lot to bear, she took this step, one step in front of the other, and found healing in the incomprehensible. This episode may be triggering to some viewers, so please note we're not professionals or advice givers. We are simply sharing our lived experiences to help ease somebody else's journey and our own. And for now, here's Jackie's conversation with Keegan.
Keegan.
Hi.
Welcome, and thank you for being part of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm so excited, and I'm so honored that I get to sit here with you.
Aw. I've done a brief introduction to you, but do you want to just start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, I am 29 years old. I am currently an insurance broker in Cranbrook. I have a 7-year-old son. I practiced actually massage therapy for several years in town. Born and raised in the Kootenays, love the mountains, and now I'm just on a journey to hopefully get into some sort of psychology or counseling. It's something that I'm truly passionate about. So when I first heard of the project that you had, I had to get my hands on it somehow in some sort of way. So I'm really thankful for that.
That you did. I loved it. I think you caught wind of it and you're all over it, and I really appreciate it. And you've been a really good visionary, and just kind of makes me feel safe to know that you're there and that you support it and that you want to be a part of it. And I think that your voice and your message is so pure, and I think that I couldn't be happier to sit with you tonight and kind of just explore bits of yourself and maybe allude to some reasons why you are so passionate about this kind of thing, right?
Totally, yeah.
So your son is 7? You're
He is
busy,
7.
I'm sure. You got a full-time job.
So busy, yes. So I do work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, classic banker's hours.
Yeah.
Hender, his name is Hendrik. We call him Hender, and he's 7 years old, just turned 7 in February. And it's crazy to think that I am turning 30 this year, and I have a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So
You were young.
I was young, and he was unexpected. It was actually the last 3 months of my massage therapy program I got pregnant, and the last 3 months were really heavy in that program. It's all putting everything together, all the anatomy, physiology, neurology, practical stuff, putting it all together into one. And only my teachers knew I was pregnant, and at the very end I almost slept through an entire exam, and my teacher comes up, she was like, "You're the only one that passed." I'm like, oh, that's great. So I don't know how that happened. It was just the luck of the draw, but it was an intense time, and I wasn't ready. But I look back on that, like hindsight is 2020, and I knew that the universe or God or something in the powerful realm of the world knew I needed my son more than I did, and he was definitely, I've been through traumatic experiences prior to him being born, and I never worked through those traumatic experiences until after he was. I found that was almost like a catalyst for that. So so I'm really thankful for him, and he gives me anxiety, but what kid doesn't? So.
What were the challenging aspects of having a son? I wouldn't say it's so young, but it is kind of in maybe in our town or what have you, it is quite young, right?
Yeah. So, the challenges for myself was I was not living here. I was living in Kelowna studying massage therapy school. So I was with my baby daddy at the time. And, those challenges, just trying to figure out life and figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? So right when I graduated, 3 months later, so I was 3 months pregnant, I moved into my uncle's house rent-free, which was really nice. We saved money. I got my first job at Kootenay Therapy Center as a practicing massage therapist. We bought a beautiful house, and everything looked so fantastic on paper, but working through it was just, I didn't know what I was doing. It was almost like I was blind doing everything. It was like I was running on autopilot, just trying to figure out how to, prepare to being a parent. And then all of a sudden, my son came in February, and I went back to work 2 weeks later, which is insane, but I was my own business owner, and I didn't have maternity leave because I didn't have a job for a long time. I was practicing or learning in school, so I wasn't working in that time. So yeah, it was a lot. And I look back and I'm like, holy shit, like how did I make it through? Like some days now I can't make it through, and like my days are pretty easy now. But yeah, I don't really know how I managed it, but I had a lot of good support and powered right through it. And I was so thankful at that time to have so much family. I had all of my family here to help me. So that's why
Yeah,
I
when
went
you're
back.
talking about navigating, like being a parent or like trying to figure out how to do it, and like what was your experience like with your parents, I guess?
Yeah, good question. Um, so my dad was never really present in my life. So I did have a stepdad, but even in saying that, he wasn't really present. Like I didn't really look at him like a stepdad, more like a brother, I guess you could say, which kind of sounds weird. But my mom was very present in my life. Single mom. She had a brain aneurysm when I was 3, and it was her frontal lobe, orbitofrontal lobe. So it's just right behind her left eye. And what that had done for her, and she didn't really realize this until later in life, she's mentally disabled because of it. So in saying that, I grew up learning this disability. And again, at the time, we didn't know. Like my mom was like put out of the hospital a day later after brain surgery. There was no pamphlet. Like I guess we don't really get pamphlets for anything, but they didn't give her any medication, like other than pain medication. They didn't tell her she was going to feel different or be different. And then so moving on in life from that, she had to be a single mom with 2 kids, mentally disabled, holding on to generally 3 jobs at a time. And I remember from that time just having so much love with my mom. Like she was really, really good at that. But now as an adult, with my own training and understanding and research that I've done on my own with brain injuries and trauma to the brain and neurology as a whole, as I understand that certain things that she had. So like, for example, your frontal lobe is the CEO of your brain, and decision making, planning, logic. And she didn't really have any of that. And it might sound sour for me to say that, but she was just a very emotional being. And
How did it look like to not have that
to not have that.
for you? Like what was your experience? And
So for me, what I saw a lot of the time is just emotional outbursts. So she would cry over a spilled glass of water kind of idea. So it was really good in a sense with that emotion, because I felt a lot of that emotion. I'm a very empathetic human being. I'm very compassionate, and so is my mom. We feel a lot. But those decision making, like I find I have a lot of frustration in my own life now, because like, oh my gosh, there's so many decisions, or like planning something, or like multitasking. Like I can't multitask if my life depended on it. So those are certain things that we just never really had growing up. Like, my mom was really poor as well. So we never had a vehicle growing up, and we never had nice clothes, and we always went to the food bank, and my mom couldn't manage her own life. She couldn't, which like cannot blame her for that, because like I don't have a brain injury. I developed one to a point, like I can work through these things, but she could not. So when I look back on my life, like as a child going through that, I didn't see it that way. Like that was my normal. That was just how life was. And then through school, meeting other kids, realizing, wow, like their lives are really different, and their parents do things a different way. And then just almost seeing a little bit of jealousy in that, and just not understanding what that is. And obviously now as a 29-year-old woman, I see what that is, and I can have a lot of compassion for that. And there's a point where I'm thankful that I got to experience that, and I got to see that side of life and to learn from it, and to grow from it. So that's just something that I really struggled with, I guess, as a child, is not learning those skills, like taking care of myself. My mom never took care of herself. She never exercised, never ate very well, never, she would never have, well, she would have baths, but like those self-care tools, like
staples of like
totally.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of that, and lots of ups and downs. My mom would go through like really good times and then really bad times. There were times in my life growing up that my mom wouldn't come out of her bedroom, and I was always making my own lunch since like grade 1. So there was just, I guess to sum it up, is I became an adult really, really young. And it was really hard, especially when I started getting through middle school and high school and having to navigate not only the pressures of high school, but the pressures of home and keeping them separate. This is going to start to get into my story, but I get into high school where I was skipping a lot because I couldn't handle being at school, but I also couldn't handle being at home. So I would just be with friends, at Safeway, or we'd go to the other schools like Parkland. We'd just go on walks, and I'd never be at school. And there came a time where my mom actually wrote a letter. She was very depressed, but she wrote a letter to all of my teachers saying, hey, I'm sorry. I actually don't know what the letter said. I didn't know she wrote one, but I had teachers come up to me and say, oh my gosh, Keegan, like I didn't know you were going through that at home. Like we're so thankful that.
What did the letter say?
I don't know.
I'm
I
not too sure.
think it just said that, we have a lot going on at home, because we did.
Yeah.
My stepdad was around, but he wasn't really around, so he never had a job.
But it alluded to the teachers knowing that, hey, there's something here. And
Totally, 100%. So it's great that my mom put that out there, because I'm sure the teachers just looked at me like she doesn't care, she doesn't want to come to school, all those things that they could just only assume by seeing only one piece of me. But I did have teachers come up to me, and, it was a lot because I didn't realize. And then I cried because I'm like, oh my gosh. And they're like, no, like, you're doing great. You smile every day and it's okay. And we're here for you. So that was really special. Yeah. But I ended up moving out of my house in high school. So I moved out in grade 12. Well, the kicker was I was with my girlfriend and we were going to go do something. And I had saved up money. Like I had a job for a long time. My mom couldn't afford other extracurricular things for me. So I saved up money and I kept it on my dresser, and I went home one day and it was gone, and my mom had taken it for whatever reason. I don't know, I can assume. And I was really upset by it, and I was so defeated because I do my best to have a job to buy myself stuff, and I would many times, buy my family dinner when we needed it, or buy whatever we needed, and I'd always offer that. But this time I was saving it for something specific. I don't exactly remember what that was, but I came home and it was gone, and I was really upset, and I was embarrassed because my friend was there, and I never wanted my friends to know my home life because I was so embarrassed by that. That was shame to me. That was something I was so ashamed of. So I was really upset, and I actually went to my mom's sister's house, her and her husband at the time. They're now divorced, and they knew a lot of what was going on. It was my mom's sister, so my aunt obviously knew her quite well. And they had told me, like, hey, if you need a place to go, we're not going to tell you to come here, but you can ask, and we'll let you move in if you choose to. So I decided to ask them, and I moved in, and right at the beginning of grade 12.
How did that sever kind of the relationship with your mom by doing that, or did it?
It really did. So my mom took it really, really hard, of course. I cannot blame her for that. I was shunned from my own family. I wasn't allowed to go home for Christmas. It was a really hard time. I remember at that time, like I was going through a lot. So I'd tell my friends these things that I was going through, or like allude to them. Mm-hmm. And my one guy friend, he messaged me back and he was like, Keegan, you have a lot of problems and I can't be your friend. And like, that was like the time that I was like, I don't have anybody right now. Like, I really need a friend. So that was
Ouch.
A really tough time. Oh my gosh, I didn't think I'd talk about this, but that was a really hard time. But with my mom, things get better. Like with her brain aneurysm and her injury, things, they go up and down. And she always has love for me, and I think she understood it. She soon, I think, understood that I needed that time away. But I do know to this day, like I must have been 16 or 17, and to this day, as a 29-year-old woman, she still holds a little bit of anger towards my aunt. She thinks my aunt eluded me away, and which kind of makes sense when I move into the rest of my story here. Yeah. But so basically what had happened was I moved.
I'll just ask you quickly. Yeah. Just because it's the staple. When you think of holding onto your heart, the phrase, what do you think of?
So this is what I think of. I had moved into my auntie's house in high school, needing a second chance on life, needing a second chance on learning what it's like to be a teenager, because I never experienced just being a teenager, having fun, not worrying about rent or bills or, if something crazy is going to happen, and just being comfortable. So thankfully, my aunt and her husband brought me in, her ex-husband now, and they became like parents to me. And my auntie's now ex-husband, I became really close with him. He was like a dad to me. I never really had a dad, so I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like to have a father and what that was. But that's what it was for me, was that care and that, how are you today? And, you are your best self and you are your best friend and, you're the best person in your life. Like, you'd give me all this great advice that I'd never heard before. And I do remember him saying several times to me that, your mom isn't a good person. And he would always talk very negatively about my mom. And I think on the outside looking in, it could look that way. But if you truly don't know what my mother was experiencing with on a neurological level, then you're not really going to understand, like, she wasn't trying to be the way that she was. It's just how it was neurologically. So
And she's still your mother.
she's still my mom, right? Regardless of how shitty things were at times, she's still my mom, and I love her to pieces. So I built this beautiful relationship with this family. And after I'd graduated, like, I had a great grade 12. Like, I'm beyond blessed and thankful for it. After I'd graduated, my uncle on my father's side of the family, so on my biological dad's side of the family.
Who you didn't know.
Exactly. So I didn't know my dad, but I knew parts of his family. So my uncle had noted that, hey, I just bought a house. There's a guest suite. Do you want to move in? You can pay me rent, and you'll actually have your own space. And I'm like, great. So it's like my first step outside of like living with somebody. So I took that opportunity. I started going to college, and it was a really exciting time. I just turned 19. I was drinking all the time, going to parties, thought it was so cool. Really learning how to be an adult, because I had to be now so much more self-sufficient. Well, unfortunately, one night, it was actually the night after me and my baby daddy had just started dating. I was really excited about it because I had a crush on him forever. So I went to my auntie and her ex-husband's house, the one that I used to live with. And I was so excited about it. And we were drinking, and they had family over, and we're having a big family dinner. And I ended up getting very, very drunk to the point of it was 10 p.m. and my auntie took me to bed, and she was like, go to bed. I had college the next day. And that night at probably 12 a.m., I woke up to, unfortunately, my auntie's ex-husband now sexually molesting me. So that was a really traumatic time in my life where fight or flight happened. I fled the scene. This man had the audacity to ask me if he could continue. Insane. This is a man that I had that I lived with, that he was like a father to me, that it was almost like that narcissistic, and I can't diagnose him because I really don't now. I'm throwing words out now, but he kind of reeled me in with all these nice things, and then he would just talk trash about my mom, but you're still amazing, and you're still beautiful, and I'm here for you, and I'm going to take care of you. But all of a sudden now, when I'm so secure in myself, that I'm so independent, that I'm now just started dating this man that I had a crush on for a long time, which he knew about, now he's going to cross that boundary for me and do something so not okay. And I was 19 at the time, so I was an adult. So it's, looking at it age-wise, yeah, I was of age, but it doesn't take away the fact of how dirty it was, or how, he just kind of took so much away from me in that moment. The innocence away from me, and, that excitement. Here's this family who gave me that second chance of life, who now he just kind of ripped it away, and I had to start from scratch. And, the kind of funny part about it, if I could say it, is my mom hated the man already, like for years. She never liked him. Hate is a really strong word, but she always felt there was something off with him. And she knew. She knew. And hindsight, I say this all the time, hindsight is 2020. When I look back, the stuff that man did, how he would touch me just in public and what he would say to me, it was like he is a pedophile. He's a perpetrator. And thankfully now, several years later, my auntie did divorce him. But that is a time where I really had to hold on to my heart, for sure.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
It's kind of uncomprehendable to hear it out loud, and I don't even know where to start with asking a question about it. I mean,
well,
who did you turn to when you found out? You say you fled the scene that night, and where'd you go? What did you do? Like, what were the...
So that night, so I'd woken up to this, and it was quite traumatic, and he and I even had a small conversation, which is weird. I ended up leaving, so I got in my car. At this time, I felt sober. Like, when I went to bed, I had a puke bucket beside me. Like, my auntie brought me medicine. Her husband was laying behind me in bed, like, rubbing my back. Like, I was drunk. But when I woke up at, like, 12 a.m., I was sober, because it was just, that was a very sobering moment to be like, somebody is crossing a line right now. So I got in my 1994 Saturn, revved the engine, drove out of town to my uncle's house where I was living. So on my dad's side of the family, separated, where I was living, and I cried all night, and I was hyperventilating, and I called my one girlfriend, Caitlin, and she lives in Calgary, and I was not sure what to do, how to comprehend it. I ended up going to college the next day, so I went to my classes still. And then that night, I actually had dinner with my uncle, the one that I live with now. So I had dinner with him, and I was being quiet. Like, I'm not a quiet person. He was like, "What's wrong?" So I told him. And before I got to the ugly part, he just came and hugged me, and I had to tell him what was wrong. And that was the first person that I really told. And it was really hard for me, because here's this other man in my life that I also trust, another uncle. And, how am I going to open up this part of me and be so vulnerable with another man? Like, it just kind of like cut that off for me. So, that's one person that I turn to, and still to this day, I'm able to turn to him, and it's really helpful. I did end up going to counseling at one point. But the funny thing with that is I was very numb. So I never talked about the sexual molestation that I had experienced. I talk about, like, me and my boyfriend are fighting. Like, what do I do? But I think that's what was happening on the surface, because of what happened underneath of the sexual molestation, and not, knowing how to deal with it and cope with it. Other problems kind of surfaced, just like normal daily things, but those are the only things I could think of. I couldn't even think of the actual trauma that happened. I did end up reporting him to the police. And
how long after?
So I actually made an Instagram post, and I still have it, but my Instagram post was like a picture of me in 2013 saying it's like, what a shitty day. Like, that was like my post. I think it was April. So this happened in January 22nd of 2013. I finally reported it in April, and nothing had happened. Nothing did. We got on video. I had to write an interview, or like write a statement. I did a video statement with an officer, and I was numb, and I didn't even cry, and I didn't process things. And I look back, and I'm like, they probably fucking thought I was lying, because I was so like stone cold. This is the fact. This is what happened. Jail the motherfucker kind of thing. And the officer he was very kind, and he told me that when he interviewed my auntie's now ex-husband, his story was different in every situation. He wouldn't get on camera. He verbally told his story. He wrote it out. He said that he was blackout drunk the whole time. Like, me and this man had a full-on conversation in the middle of the night. So, yeah, like, that was hard for me to do, because I had to really face it, and I had to get in front of law enforcement. And, like, to me, that's very intimidating, to get in front of somebody of what I like to say power, because law enforcement do have power, to share something so vulnerable. But I don't think I actually ended up working through that until after I had my son.
Do you think that like it just kind of came to a halt because there was no action taken by the people that were supposed to maybe protect you
Yeah,
in a way?
absolutely. I see what you're saying with that. I think so. I started actually massage therapy school in September of 2013, so about 9 months after the incident had happened. And with massage therapy, you're basically naked on a table and somebody is touching you. And it was a full 2-year program. But certain times throughout that, like I still had not processed everything. And certain times throughout that, I would have, like, we'd be practicing techniques on each other in class all the time. And one technique specifically, a colleague in class was practicing it on me, and it was to do with an area that I was touched. And I, fight or flight, I jumped off the table, I ran to the bathroom, and I sat in there and cried. And I didn't really know why. I mean, I knew why, but I didn't because I'd never processed it. But I was like, whoa, this is really fucking weird. Why is this happening? And I started to shame myself for it. Like, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, it's been X amount of time. I shouldn't be freaking out, like, what's going on. And now I know, like, this is a natural response to something with trauma, like that fight or flight situation. So, yeah, like I hadn't processed, like, especially after, going to law enforcement about it and charging him. I just decided to, like, nope, that's yucky. It doesn't feel good. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to put that beach ball under the water and push it down as far as it can go.
What do you think it shattered for you then to know that that man that you trusted did that?
I think, I don't know if I can verbalize that, but I do know that since I never really had a fatherly figure in my life, like I really still don't really know what it's like to, like, have a dad, have that strong man to take me to go fishing and do all the manly things. I think it shattered that for me, and it made me really worried when I have my own children, which I do now. Mm-hmm. But I was like, how am I going to ever trust a man again? Mm-hmm. And B, will I ever be with a man good enough to be a good enough father to my children? Mm-hmm. Because I never really had that father. So then all of a sudden, this man that I thought was, or that I trusted to be one, he just kind of took that away from me in one foul swoop, like very quickly. And, I think that's what that shattered for me, was that hope, like having a father figure now. Well, now I don't. It was just like that rug was pulled out right from under me.
Then you talked about, like you'd be fighting with your boyfriend, or things would come up for you and you would never relay it back to that incident, but you kind of, things were kind of cropping up. Like, do you want to paint a picture of, like, what maybe the byproduct of going through something like that would look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I ended up going to massage therapy school in September 2013. So my boyfriend and I, we stayed together during this time. We ended up doing a year of long distance. And absence makes the heart grow fonder. So this was a hard time because obviously somebody that we love, we want to see them all the time. And I would really only get to see him maybe once a month for a little bit. But he ended up moving to Kelowna to be with me, which was really awesome and really special. And I was so excited. Well, in saying that, when you go from not seeing somebody and never living with that person to now you're living with them and seeing them every day, it in itself kind of brings up a lot of turmoil within us. We start to learn a lot about ourselves. Well, I think in me learning a lot about myself in that time, with being with my boyfriend at that time, I then started to notice that I hadn't worked through a lot. So during this time, it's really hard to paint this picture, but I was going to school and feeling crazy. I went to a walk-in doctor and I told her, I was like, I'm feeling crazy. I need to see a psychologist. And she was like, well, why do you feel that way? And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel crazy. I need pills. I need this. I need that. I'm going to school. Like, there's just lots going on. Mm-hmm. And I ended up being diagnosed with depression, but I didn't understand why. Like, I truly didn't. That situation that had happened to me was in the past. I didn't even think about it because I think I've swallowed it down so deep that, like, I ate the goddamn thing and, like, it ain't coming out. Now I'm constipated. Like, that's just kind of where it went for me. So I would then have outbursts at home, and it could be anything. One really kind of funny, really beautiful example was, so back when my ex had moved in with me, I was having a shower, and my ex is a jokester. So he comes in the bathroom and I don't see him, and he has this big bucket of ice, like literally huge. It's the one that you get from like Home Depot. And I don't know how, mostly cold water, but ice. And he dumps it in the shower. And in like that moment, on me, all over me. And it's cold, like I'm having a really hot shower. Like I like them warm. So I flip out. And in this moment, all of a sudden I feel like I'm seeing black or red or whatever the saying is. Like I'm like freaking out. But B, it takes me back to being a little girl and something irritating my mom. This emotional outburst where there's no logic, there's no control, there's no understanding. It's just like I'm 0 to 100 real quick, crying over spilled milk. So I freak out, and he thinks he's being funny, which it is really funny. Like now I do shit like that. I'm like, now I'm being the dick. But so I freak out and I get out of the shower and I get my towel on and we go and sit on the bed and I'm crying. Now I'm from mad to crying. And it's not that that act did that to me. It's that there's clearly undertones. There's clearly something going on underneath that I have never, and up until that point, had not dealt with. And even after this point, I never dealt with it for a while. And we're sitting there on the bed. And we had a roommate at this time. His name's Chris. And Cody's like, Chris, grab the computer and play the song. And I'm sitting there with my ex, and he's rubbing my back. And you just see Chris in the corner coming through the door, and he like slides this laptop through, and it's In the Arms of an Angel song playing. And so now I'm really crying because like I sang this song at my auntie's funeral, and a different auntie, and he's like holding me and rocking me. But like in that moment, looking back, I know that that was just to paint that picture for you, like an emotional outburst where I wasn't dealing with that trauma that has shook me to my core, literally. And it was playing out in all these little things that truly didn't matter and that just didn't really make sense for it to. But in that moment, I'm so thankful that A, I had this hilarious like roommate. B, my boyfriend at the time was so understanding and so full of love. And
he was well aware of what happened to you?
So he was, yeah. I actually didn't even touch on that, but he and I started dating, let's say January 22nd. Mm-hmm. The incident happened January 23rd. He was actually working away at the time. He went away to like Fernie somewhere, only for a few days, and he came home. And at this time I was scared. I didn't know what had happened, and I was like, I feel dirty, like I was just touched by another man. I don't know if I should tell my boyfriend because it's so fresh, but I also don't want to keep it from him because I would hate to tell him later and him say, hey, you never told me. So I did. I told him that weekend, and he knew from the very beginning, and he was very supportive, and he was very angry because what grown man does that to their niece, their daughter, you know, in their right mind? Clearly this man wasn't in his right mind, and I always like to hold a lot of compassion. So, hey, maybe this grown man thought that was okay. Maybe he's been through something. Like, now I'm making excuses for other people, but my boyfriend at the time did fully know what I had gone through, and he was there to support me every step of the way. He thought I was crazy when I would say, hey, well, it's not his fault. Like, here's me trying to make reasons, trying to piece things together so I feel better in my heart. And my boyfriend's like, no, you don't do that to somebody.
What a blessing to have someone in your corner at that time, right? Like, and faithful, that like kind of the same day. Like, it's like almost shocking how that played out for you.
Yeah, it's the trajectory of it, the timeline is so kismet almost. Like, it's like, you know, this is why I have to explain the whole story of it, because it truly is a story. And it really makes you open your eyes and think, like, how do things happen like that? Like, how you know, just how things kind of roll out. And, you know, a big part of my experience with massage therapy, like I don't practice anymore, a big reason is because of the sexual trauma that I had been through. I was actually sexually harassed over the course of a year by a patient that consistently got worse. Like, it's just those small acts that turn into big ones. And, you know, by the end of my year of treating this man, I also treated his wife. I would call in sick to work those days. I would cancel his appointments those days. And then I was losing money because I'm a small business owner. So if I don't have clients, I don't have money. And it was really impacting me. And this is the exact moment that I started seeking therapy, because I knew, you know, we talk about projections and we're kind of attracting, and maybe I wasn't attracting this client because of what had happened, but I felt, okay, these things are happening in my life and I haven't dealt with them and they keep happening. So clearly I need to deal with it. And, you know, like, to get a little TMI, it was impacting like my sex life. I couldn't be comfortable with myself with another man. Like, it's just point blank. Yeah, I had a baby, but like, who's to say it was a comfortable time having,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Sometimes you can do the motions and it's like you're clawing from the inside out, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's not always what it appears to be, right?
Totally.
I think that's why we share these stories, is because it's not what we think sometimes.
Absolutely, right? 100%. So, you know, it's just really interesting, again, how those timelines occur and, you know, what thing pushes to the next to push me to finally seek help for that. And it took a long time. And, you know, we can talk about the financial side. Like, I was a small business owner and I was a mom too, like a new mom. And we just bought a house, like trying to figure out life. And now I have to have this expense of paying like $150 an hour to see a counselor. But it's changed my life, and I love her, and I call her my personal hype girl, and I still see her today, and it's been about 7 years. But, you know, there's that financial side, and like, lots of people don't go for help because they know that, you know, I can't afford it. Like, that's a lot of money to be forking out, and for what? Like, you know, if you haven't seen the results, it's hard to see that you will see the results of that help. So, but yeah, that's...
We bring it back because you said that was the minute that I went for help, and it was when you were in massage therapy, you realized that this man was crossing lines with you, and you kind of felt like you were attracting this kind of energy in your life. Am I getting that right?
You are getting that right. Yeah, you're really picking it up. So at that time, this is now, I can't remember exactly what month. I think it was 2017 though. So my son had just turned a year. And I was having these experiences with this client. This client would show himself to me. He would try to touch me. All these things. So I wasn't sure what was going on. I was like, am I seeing this way? Is it happening this way? Am I overthinking it? Is it because of what I went through? Like, this is now where the wheels are turning. I've also had my son. So there's this vulnerability there too of being a mom and all these other things that you start to think about with being a mom. I never really would have understood that until I was a mom. But I went to my boss, and my boss is a pelvic floor therapist. And this client had something going on with his pelvic floor. And so I told my boss, I was very vulnerable with her. And I told her the experience that I had with my auntie's ex-husband. And I said, hey, I'm dealing with this with a client. I don't know if it's wrong or not, but can you please help me? So she decided to come into the treatment room with us in the beginning of one of these treatments. It's actually my last treatment with him. And they talked about his situation that wasn't seeming to get better by me. So I was like, clearly it's not getting better. Let's pull in a professional for the pelvic floor. So she talked to him about it. It was all fine and dandy. It was awesome. They decided to book a few pelvic floor appointments, and I would just do the normal back massage, I guess you could say. As soon as she left, this client turns to me and he looks me in the eyes and he says, I know why she was in here. And it shook me, and I was like, yeah, you know, she's helping me. I'm still learning. I don't really know what's going on. And like, I just want to give you the best care that I can. So I kind of played it off. Well, then I do the normal motions. I step out so they can get on the table. I knock on the door. I come back in. And that treatment was the messiest treatment I've ever experienced. This man said that he's going to take advantage of me, that he's going to bring alcohol into the treatment room next time. And then if I tell anybody, he's going to tell people that I took advantage of him. And like, here's my bells going. Because in massage therapy school, we do learn that clients can put us on a pedestal. Like, we're kind of up here like doctors, like what we say goes, like, you know, ice your back, you know, put your foot in clay, like whatever we say, they'll do it, which is, you know, kind of neat. But when it comes to a court case as well, we also know that the client is always right. It's hearsay. And we put clients in a vulnerable state. So I start getting scared. I'm like, if I say anything, and if we go to court for this, I'm going to be the one that loses my career. I'm going to be reprimanded. What is my community going to think of me? What's my family going to think of me? My boyfriend at the time, my baby daddy, he didn't know about any of this because I didn't share anything about clients or treatments to my family. Like, it's all confidential. So I was freaking out. So he leaves. It was a mess. And I tell my boss, I was like, you coming in made it worse. And I was crying. And she was like, okay, we will have like a phone, I can't remember what it's called, like a conference with him. So anyways.
With this client?
With this client.
Yeeks.
So I wasn't a part of that conference. It was just my boss, him, and I think the office manager. And the day approached, well, actually not even that. So what had happened is he had booked a pelvic floor appointment, like let's say 2 weeks in advance. And then he booked one with me right after. So it was like pelvic floor, massage. Well, just before his appointment came that day, he canceled the pelvic floor, but kept the massage. So my boss comes up and she was like, hey, he canceled the pelvic floor. I'm gonna call him this afternoon and I'm gonna have a phone conference with him. So I'm like, okay, great. Freaking out. I'm like she's gonna have a phone conference. What's gonna happen? All of a sudden, it's taking me back to my uncle when I reported him for sexually molesting me. So I'm like, what's gonna happen? Like, all these emotions have come up again. So she has a phone conference with him and I don't talk to her. I don't see her. Then the office manager finds me. She's like, hey, your boss is looking for you. So I'm like, okay. So I see my boss when I'm sitting in her office. And she tells me that she believes him and he blamed me. And it was a very, very difficult time. And I didn't, in that moment, plead my case. I stood up for myself in the effect of saying, this is my story. This is what's happened. I'm really sorry you can't believe me or see my side of it and that you're going to believe him. But I'm not going to play the he said, she said game. This is my experience. So what my boss had told me is he's still allowed to come to the office. He just can't see me. And because he told her that he would blackball her business. So that was really a scary and hard time. And that's when I finally decided to tell my boyfriend at the time of what had happened. And that's when I knew that, you know, I need to go for help. Like, I wasn't comfortable in my own relationship. All of a sudden I'm doing this vulnerable job where people are naked on the table and it puts me in a vulnerable position as well. I experienced a sexual trauma with family and now I have a child that I need to worry about. What's going to happen to him? What is he going to go through? Is he going to be a perpetrator as well? Like, there's so many things that were going on. So my boss did. A few days later, she was like, oh, now I believe you. Maybe he's a sociopath. And at that time, I was like, I don't care. Like, this is my story. This is what I've been through.
I'm going to get help either way.
100%. So I called my counselor. Love her. I don't know if I could say her name on this, but her name's Bettina in town.
Woo,
And
Bettina.
Yeah, she's great. I've been seeing her now for, I want to say 6 years, not 7 years, about 6 years. And she did treatment with me called EMDR, and that, I believe, saved my life because I was in a very dark place after that when, you know, traumas just resurface with new trauma and, you know, trauma's just on trauma. But it was, that's that pivoting point where I was like, I need help.
What was your experience doing the EMDR?
So it was different. EMDR, I'll share with you what it is, regardless if you know what it is or not. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So what that is, it's kind of like a hypnosis where when people have a traumatic experience, we think about like files in a desk and you open your file and they're all organized in those little like file holders. I don't even know what they're called, file folders. Well, what a trauma does is it like spits them all out. So now they're everywhere and you're like trying to pick them up. It's almost like that meme, like fuck it, it's Friday. You know, like that's what a trauma does. So what EMDR does is there's eye movement that happens when we're in REM sleep. So that's like our sleep of what we're dreaming. So eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is what our brain is trying to do. Is our therapist will get our eyes to move back and forth, so we can have our eyes open or we can have our eyes closed. And now what we're doing is going back through that trauma, and we'll go through it from when we were a kid. And hey, maybe we don't know we had trauma at that time, but there's probably experiences as a child that have impacted us and we never realized it. Then we go to the present. So what just happened? You know, my client was very inappropriate with me. And then the future, like what are we scared of is going to happen? That's like that anxiety part of it. And so now our eyes are going back and forth. We're thinking of these experiences, be it perceived experiences that might happen or things that did happen. And then we're just kind of reprocessing it. And so that for me was very beautiful in the sense that I didn't realize how many things in my life up until that point were impacting me. And a great thing about EMDR is we're focusing on beliefs. So we have beliefs when we go through a trauma, like, oh, one belief that I had was I'm not lovable, or I'm not worthy of love. And so my therapist starts to go through like, okay, well, what makes you feel that way? And then we start working on that belief. And then at the end, I'm like, do you know what? Fuck yeah, I am worthy of love. Because I can love myself and I don't need anybody else to love me. And just because this one thing happened to me does not mean that I'm not worthy. So EMDR was something that really helped me. And even when I went through my separation with my baby daddy, I even did EMDR for that, which is like, it's not necessarily a traumatic experience, but it's something that I went through that was impacting my own beliefs, that was impacting how I was presenting myself in my life. And that was also giving me a little bit of anxiety. So it was something that was really able to
It is really neat, EMDR, in the sense that that thing that can feel catastrophic or just so heavy, like you do a session with someone like her and all of a sudden you feel air. Like that's what I feel, right? You get the tingles.
totally.
And I think it taps into your nervous systems, does it not? Like when your eyes are shuffling like that, you're tapping into a different nervous system, making yourself feel safe, right? Anyways, that's how I interpret what's happening in my body, right? I'm like, I'm safe.
Totally.
But it's, yeah, all of a sudden, that thing that you were, bent over crying about is now this thing of like, what happened? Like, and it's like, it's kind of nice in that instantaneous kind of healing piece where, like, maybe someone like yourself seemed very intellectual, but it's the EMDR kind of gives you that physical even response where it's like, whew, I'm shedding this,
Totally.
right? So, and it's a very good therapy. I am familiar and glad that you found healing in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 6 years, so do you feel like you concentrate mostly on EMDR therapy, or do you?
It comes and
Assortment?
goes.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. It's great that you brought that up because I don't always do EMDR. I love talk therapy. I do lots of different types of therapies. Just talk to my therapist. No. But what had happened actually is I started seeing somebody a few months ago and they ended up being related to that client.
Wow.
And I freaked out and I went to Bettina. I was like, I don't know what to do. Should I tell this guy that I'm seeing what had happened? Do I not tell him? Because this is something that's confidential. Like there's still that client confidentiality. But I was scared, like, hey, what if this goes somewhere? Then we go to a Christmas dinner and I'm like, hey bud, how's it going? Like, it's been a while. So I actually did EMDR for that. And so how that looked was, Bettina got me into my state and she was like, okay, this was us looking into the future. So what might happen? Because nothing crazy had happened at that point. I was just like, what if, like, should I tell my new friend that, like, this is what happened to me as a massage therapist? And so I ended up going to Bettina for, EMDR in this situation because I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to approach it. Was I going to tell this man that I'm seeing something confidential about his family member and open myself up to that? What if this doesn't go further? Now what am I opening myself up to? What if he tells his family member what I just said. Now, is he going to go to the authorities and be like, this massage therapist is sharing confidential information? So I did. I went to Bettina for EMDR on that, and she basically put a picture in my mind and said, okay, what do you feel by looking at this picture? And the picture was me at a Christmas party and seeing my ex-massage client come in. And right there, it brought me a lot of anxiety, heavy in the chest, lots of pressure in the chest, my redness and like dry mouth and shaking. And then, what beliefs do you have on yourself? And then we were able to move through the EMDR. And at the end, it was like, now how do you feel? And at that moment, I felt empowered. And fuck no, like, this is who I am. I'm strong. I know my story. Nobody else is going to take that away from me. If they believe me, great. If they believe him, great. It shows that he has support on his end too, right? So like in that moment, I started to feel a little bit more strength in my position, and EMDR was really helpful. So again, that was just a recent experience that I had with it, and I will stick to it to this day. And I don't always do EMDR. It's a lot of talk therapy, but it's changed my life, and it's helped me in so many other areas. It's helped me be more confident. It's taught me to change my beliefs on myself, because regardless of the trauma that I had experienced with, the sexual molestation and different things like that, I didn't always have the best beliefs about myself, and that could have been for a multitude of reasons. But yeah, I definitely stand behind EMDR.
I think you said you shed some beliefs around feeling unlovable. And what are some other beliefs that you've been able to shed in order to find healing and wholeness?
Being smart. I've always had this belief that I was dumb or stupid, and I know where they've come from. So they've come from my mom. That's something that she said all the time, which I don't blame her, but she would, I have this vision in my mind of where she's like grabbing her hair and she's like, oh, I'm so stupid. Like, she would say that a lot, and hindsight's 2020, my famous saying, but she truly felt that way because she didn't know life. She'll forever be a 16-year-old, like cognitively in her frontal lobe, like she just won't progress from that. So she would say that all the time. And as children, and I just know this, physiologically, but we are sponges between the age of 0 to 7 to 10. So whatever we're hearing during that time or seeing, we absorb it and it becomes us, and it turns into our autopilot, and that's the basis of our personality, and that's where a lot of beliefs can come from. And so these visions that I have, these memories of my mom and myself communicating when I was really, really little, and me seeing these things of, because I was 3 when she had her brain aneurysm. So that's a very spongy time in our lives as children. I absorbed a lot of that. And so that was a belief of mine that I've been learning to shed through EMDR and having confidence. Like I didn't have a lot of confidence growing up, being very, very poor, not having, a lot of food on our table, or never knowing if we're going to still have a roof over our head or not, or if my mom's still going to have a job or not. That showed a lot of non-confidence. Like, I don't know the opposite of that, but insecurity, I guess you could say. And, I've learned through, as crazy as it sounds, EMDR, just through different sessions that, I am not my past. I am not my mom. I am not stupid. I am not insecure. We can have insecurities, but it does not mean that I am insecure. And I think it's been really powerful. And just as I said, like, I don't think we have to have a traumatic experience in order to go through EMDR, but it definitely is beneficial for people who have had trauma in their life.
What are you still struggling with, or what crops up for you today from some of these traumatic experiences?
I'm not entirely sure what I struggle with in regard to these specific experiences. I can think, I think I struggle with companionship, to find that partner.
What part of it feels like a challenge?
finding, I feel like this almost sounds completely opposite, but to me it correlates as like finding that perfect person, because I know that I am so imperfect, and there's a lot of that shame just in regard to that trauma. Like, I have a lot that I'm dealing with, and who do I want to let into that? So I get really worried of finding that person that I know that I can fully be myself, and they won't shame me for what I've been through, and they won't label me a certain way, or they won't have these preconceived notions. That's what I currently am struggling with. You know, I had a long-term partner while I was going through both of those traumatic experiences, and he had helped me through a lot of that. And then all of a sudden, him and I separate, and my world is shaken, and now I have to be comfortable with letting somebody else in. And, you know, are they going to love all those parts of me? Are they going to understand? Are they going to have patience? You know, so I think that's really where I struggle, that I'm still, you know, I'm learning that. And I've definitely been on dates, but then it's like, oh, you know, where's the fine line? When do I share this stuff? When do I not share it? And just really navigating that. And
would you want to shed any light on like the separation of you and your baby daddy?
I mean, I could. Absolutely. You know, we mutually, well, I shouldn't necessarily say mutually. I had felt that I was growing at a pace that, in my mind, which is my perception, that I just felt that he wasn't. And we were like, we're doing the why. We were together for so long, and then all of a sudden, we're both going different ways, regardless of who's faster than who. But I decided to end it, and we'd still lived with each other in this home that we owned for several months after, and he started seeing somebody new, and that hit me like a brick wall. Like, it's almost like that abandonment feeling of, now I'm not good enough. Even though I left him, he found somebody right away. They're doing great. She was a friend of mine prior, so that was just, it shook my whole reality. And then just trying to navigate the trauma that I experienced, because he was the one that I went through for everything. So then now going through this separation, well, I want to go to him, but I can't. And so something really neat that I'll share with you that I think a lot of people will find a little bit of solidarity in, if that's the right word, is on an MRI with brain scans. If you put a brain scan of somebody going through heartbreak right beside a brain scan of somebody going through a heroin withdrawal, they're exactly the same.
I believe it.
Yeah. So I was like, holy shit, that was me. I was crazy. But in a very compassionate sense, like I wanted another hit, you know. I wanted to see him again. I wanted to say something mean to him just so I can get some sort of reaction. I wanted to text him. I wanted to tell him I loved him. I wanted to throw a knife through his door, but I never did. But, you know, all these things that, like, it was not an easy experience. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm way out of that, like so far gone, and I have a lot of happiness for them, and my son has an amazing stepmother, and I couldn't be more thankful that I know who she is, and I know that my son just loves the life out of her. I'm so separated from that, but now on my own, I'm like, I'm pretty comfortable on my own, but it would be nice to have another partner to be able to share this great life with. But it's just opening that door to, you know.
I think when you said I'm looking for the perfect, you're just looking to feel like you can still remain perfect for yourself with someone else. Not that they have to be this image, but more so how they jive with you and the things you've gone through. I think that's just a need that we have, right?
Totally, yeah.
So kind of companionship might feel a little bit more on the challenging side, and maybe just, I guess it does kind of relate, to your experiences, right? Just the tenderness of them, and maybe your non-negotiables and that, hey?
Definitely, yeah. That seems to be at this point one thing that I do struggle with, and it is something that I talk to my therapist about, and she's hilarious. I'll tell her about this guy that I might be seeing, like this was months ago, and she was like, oh no, honey, he ain't for you. She's like, I shouldn't be telling you this, but you need to break up with him. So I would, and then months later, she was like, I haven't seen you for a while. Did that upset you? And I'm like, no, you helped me. Thank you. So
she's got your back. Well, some people can really see it better than we can see it ourselves, right? And especially when the relationship's been that long, and if I would have listened to some of the people that would have said those things to me, I would have saved myself a lot of grief and time. Right?
Totally.
So you're still currently healing, and you are just figuring out the rest kind of day by day, but the bulk of the impacts of struggling with the trauma, or maybe the PTSD parts of that pop up that feel like, oh, this is happening again, are kind of past. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's really fair to say. I am very thankful that I'm on this part of it. I'm one of those people that I can look back and say, I'm kind of thankful that I experienced something to that extent that shook my core, that it made me want to get better, because I don't think, and regardless of what that could have been something totally different, but something that did shake my core to that point at such a young age, I don't think I would be the woman that I am today without that. I don't think I'd be the mother that I am today without that. And if I could, tell myself, my 19-year-old self now, 10 years later, so crazy, I would just tell her that it's okay. That it will get better. It's not going to get better on its own, but it will get better, and it's going to take work. Sometimes work is a scary word for me. I'm like, I don't want to work hard. Like, I just want it to be easy. But, if I could turn around and tell my 19-year-old self something, it would be, you're okay, you're strong, you're lovable, you're a better human being because of it, and it will take work, but you will get through it, and you will help other people. So
that is beautiful.
Thank you.
I love that.
Totally.
I do just want to ask about your son. Like you said, that was a really healing piece too for you when you got into that, and like not having a father, and just all of it. The story that you've told so far, that he was really helpful in being able to heal that as well.
Totally.
What does that look like as a mom?
Yeah, well, clearly I'm a single mom, so I don't really get to see the dad side of things. I feel like the dad sometimes on my end, like in my household, he obviously has his daddy-o in a different household, but it's really opened my eyes to seeing two different dynamics of parenting and seeing how it impacts one little human being. The traits that I have as a woman and the traits that his stepmom has, or the traits that his father has. It's really built this well-rounded child. And the reason why I bring that up is in the beginning of the separation, there were days that I just wanted my son full custody. Probably out of spite, probably because I was fucking pissed off of what I was experiencing in that time. But that was a really selfish thing to think and to feel. And I'm totally transparent on that. And so I look back and think, if I would have, I don't think I could have, but if I would have stripped that away from my son, I'm only doing to my son what my mom basically did to me, because my mom stripped my brother and I away from our father. And my father also never tried to make the effort, so I didn't really know my dad. But the impact that had on me, not having that father figure. And, regardless of who my son's father is, he's going to impact my son anyway. If he's the best man on the world, if he's the president, or, if he's Jesus Christ, like he's going to impact Hendrik in whatever way that is, just like I will. Yeah. I can do my best to be the perfect mom, but I have my own faults, and I'm going to unfortunately put that onto my son, whether I like it or not. And, I'm just thankful that my son gets both of his parents in his life, and he also will get bonus parents. And it's really rounded him to be the 7-year-old that he is today. And it's, giving me life, and I've learned so much just about the human experience, having him and seeing that. And
watching it all unfold.
Watching it all unfold.
I've heard from quite a few moms that say that, and if there's one reason that I think, I've never felt like this huge draw to have kids, but if there's one, it's that, right? They say they heal you, and it's just brings this wholeness, and all the parts you were missing, or the parts you don't maybe like if you're gonna yell, or if you're gonna like be a harsh punisher, or like whatever, like if that happened to you, and just like, you know, like the wanting to maybe do it to them, but then like not, and like rerouting it, and like all of that stuff. That sounds like a lot of work for sure, but it sounds like you're doing it, and you're doing a fine job of it.
Thank you.
I think it's amazing, and I wonder if there's like one question that you have that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share an answer to.
You know, I think in my experience with you today, it's been really cool. And I think we've hit a lot of, you know, the dots that I thought that we would. We hit way more than I thought that we would. I shared so much more. And you did an amazing job sitting here and listening to me and giving me space and allowing me to be me and vulnerable and open. And I don't even think that there would be any other question that you could ask me that I can't think of in this moment. So
how does it feel to share your story?
You know, it's
or parts of. I mean, it's
yeah.
not all of you, but it's some of you, right? And it is vulnerable, and it is real.
It is very vulnerable, and it feels liberating. It feels, you know, this isn't my first time sharing pieces of my story, and I feel a sense of comfort knowing that somebody else will hear this, and they will take a piece of it and apply it to their life, however that is. I've watched, obviously, almost all the other podcasts that you have done, I think all of them, and I've taken a piece of information from all of them, and I've connected with them, and they're all very different stories than mine, but I've cried to some of them, so.
That's amazing, and it's good feedback to know that, like, yeah, I think the goal is to just, if we can help one person by our lived experience, then we've done our job, right?
Totally.
And that's a good thing too, because I did want to ask you, you know, like, what is the importance for you to share the story? And I think you just said it in yourself, right? And
Absolutely.
I think you've given a good message of hope that, like, through really traumatic and uncomfortable and unfathomable experiences, you can create a beautiful life, and you take the steps to do the healing, and you did that, and you didn't have to, and you could have lived in a whole different reality with that, but it's like, what strength and courage you have to have done it, and to be here sharing it is it just elevates that, right? And it kind of shows the healing that you've done to be able to get to the point to share the story. And I admire you. I think you're a wonderful person, and you will inspire people. And I appreciate you coming on here. And we'll do much more in the future together.
Yeah.
I just know this. And we're planning something called Talking with Tacos.
So excited.
And it's going to be featuring Strong Chef Meal Prep. He said that he would come on and do it, so we'll coordinate that, and yeah, that'll be the next thing I think that me and you do together, and I'm excited for it.
Me too. Well, thanks for having me
Thank
on.
you.
I appreciate it. Yay!
Hey, I'm Morgan. I'm the producer of the Hold On to Your Heart Project podcast. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you'd like to find out more about what we're all about and check out other episodes, you can find us at holdontoyourheartproject.com or on YouTube and Instagram at Hold On to Your Heart Project. Thanks for stopping by.